Hi, thank you for joining us today. My name is Najat Shamsuddin, and I'm here interviewing an author and a playwright, Ramona Omer, also known as R.L. Omer, the author of The Prince and Timberance. So, Mom, could you just say hi?
Hi, everybody.
Yeah, I didn't mention that, but this is actually my mom. And I wanted to sit down because we wanted to have an in depth conversation about a very important project that's been close to our family for years, that we've been working tirelessly to release out into the world, and that is The Prince and Timberance. So, Mom, you actually wrote a story, and it's not just any kind of story. Can you tell us what genre story you wrote?
A fairy tale. And I wrote it for you when you were a little girl, but I guess the seeds for the story actually began when I was a little girl. In the summer, I would go to the library to really basically escape the heat and of our house. Growing up poor, a lot of times we didn't have a fan, so the library was just a place to escape to. And I would just really run around the library, aimlessly. And one day the librarian, she gave me a book and it was Cinderella. And this was like the early 70s. I had never gone to the movies. Again, being poor, we didn't go to the movies. So that was really my introduction to fairy tales. So I read that one and then I asked her, are there any more stories like that? And I ended up reading Snow White, pretty much everything that summer. And so at the end, when I read the last one, I asked her, I said, well, are there any stories with a little brown girl like me? And she said no. And I was shocked because I really expected her to say yes. I thought maybe, I just had overlooked it. And so I guess the seeds really began that summer. And then,
That's huge. Yeah,
yeah.
growing up in America, so you're born in the 60s, a child in the 70s, Iowa, so the Midwest. You didn't come from a lot of means, black, the images in the media were scarce. Even then, that's pretty much been our story historically in this country, those kinds of images. But I remember you told me a funny story that when things began being animated and you would watch like cartoons on TV, you also noticed that. So it's kind of been a pattern of you noticing what was missing in media. But what did you notice when you watched cartoons?
Yeah, I just noticed that none of the characters were brown, and I just thought to myself, being a kid, maybe I was maybe 7 or 8. I said, well, maybe they just can't draw brown people, and I just left it at that and enjoyed, what was available.
Yeah.
But then later on, I have 4 daughters, and I would read, even as they were coming up, there was still like no black fairy tale, and I just really enjoyed fairy tales. So but I realized that to say her skin was as white as snow, or to always say, oh, she was so beautiful and fair, I started thinking, how is that going to affect my daughters when I'm not reading any stories that are saying, her skin was of the color of the earth and beautiful or dark brown or just nothing. I mean, it's okay to say her skin was as white as snow and beautiful, and she was beautiful and fair with golden hair, but there was just nothing that my daughters could relate to. So I would skip over the words. I still enjoyed the stories, but I would skip over the words like her skin was as white as snow or her hair was golden like the sun. And then by the time you came along, Disney would release movies on VHS.
Mm-hmm.
So I remember I bought Beauty and the Beast. Of course, we had Cinderella and Snow White, and but you really liked Beauty and the Beast. So one day you were watching it probably for the second time that day, and I saw you flip your hair. I guess maybe she flipped her hair or something in the movie. And I said, that's it. I need to write a fairy tale with a black kingdom and just all the things that I liked about fairy tales. So you could relate to it.
Mm-hmm.
I was just tired of skipping over the words. I
And
wanted
just
to add one.
yeah.
And I'm not saying there's anything wrong with saying her skin was beautiful and as white as snow. There's nothing wrong with that, but there just needed to be something that talked about beautiful dark brown skin.
Mm-hmm.
So I started writing and I said to myself, it has to be enchanting. It has to have beautiful black fairies. It can't fall short. I didn't want to just write well, take Cinderella and dip her in chocolate and call it Curly Rella, or I didn't want to. I wanted it to be original and
Yes.
enchanting and have all the things that I liked about fairy tales in it. So that's how it started.
Yeah, that's amazing. And to be in the middle of Minneapolis in the 90s, you and dad both working parents, blue class, nobody's expect blue collar, I should say. Nobody's expecting you to write. And what was that process like? I mean, you didn't come from parents who were encouraging you to write or get an education. So how did that story writing process come about?
Inspiration. Just you is just, I guess, from me being a little girl and asking the librarian, is there a story with a little black girl like me in it? I probably said black girl, I'm not sure, but is there a story with a little black girl like me in it? And expecting her to say yes, and then when she said no, and then just skipping over the words, and then finally seeing you watch the movies, it was just like, it's time for me to just write the story that I wanted when
Yeah.
I was a little girl.
And so was it pen to paper first or?
Yeah, actually, I started just writing it. And, my husband, he would work like double shifts, 6 days a week. And on the seventh day, maybe one shift. And he saw me writing and, he was busy, but he went and bought me a little secondhand typewriter, just, and that's how it started.
Yeah. And so by that time, I was a toddler, and I just remember seeing the typewriter, and it was fun as the years went by that the typewriters would be upgraded. And, I remember the satisfying sound of them punching the keys. And yeah, you always had a typewriter, you always had a story for me, and then you always had a letter. So once you had written the story, you weren't satisfied with just reading it to your daughters. What did you then want to do?
I wanted to share it with the world because I realized there were a lot of little brown girls like my daughters who would benefit from the story,
Yeah.
because fairy tales have been around for hundreds of years, and we were just kind of left out. I did find one book because before I started writing it, I did go to like bookstores and try to find something because I thought surely by now there must be something, but still there wasn't. So Mufaro's beautiful daughters came close, but it didn't have the enchantment that I was looking for.
Yeah. And so fast forward now, the story's like how old? Almost 30 years
Yeah,
old in
yeah,
existence.
almost. Hmm.
We've gone from it being something on the typewriter to self-publishing it at like basically the turn of the new millennium, and then we would do book vendor sales. And now in 2023, the conversation around inclusion and media has changed. I remember coming across your letters to publishers, and you kind of had to craft the conversation and introduce the conversation of there are children being left out of entire genres. But now, do you think it's easier and more welcoming for a story like The Prince and Timberance to make its debut?
It would be if I had a platform because I really feel like if this story had come to someone famous, and my husband even said that, he said, you know what? And he was really honest with me. He said, it's a good story. It's a great story. But he said that market now is for celebrities. Celebrities, when they write a book, they have a guaranteed platform. So publishers pick it up. So I think it's difficult because just not having that celebrity.
Yeah. As a child growing up, knowing about this story, enjoying it from the time you read it to me when there were no illustrations. And it's been frustrating to know that you would send the letters to publishers all over the country and get back the same response one after another. Can you share what those responses were?
A lot of times it would just be like a basic generic letter that I'm sure they sent anybody. I don't know if they even read my letters. Again, if you're not a celebrity, it seems like the doors are closed pretty much.
I remember hearing that you needed a college education to write a story.
Oh, some publishers. Well, no, they didn't say that. That was just my feeling, and maybe that was why.
Oh, I really thought, because I remember saying, well, I'm going to go to college and like help you get the story
Yeah,
published.
yeah, some of them they would want to know what your credentials were. but I
Okay.
would still write the letters anyway.
Yeah. Well, I think the story has been around so long for us in our family, but the world has changed a lot, and a lot of grassroots talent can make their own platform, can find their own following, and collaborate with big people. People like Issa Rae come to mind, like people who just made a splash, and offered their story and that context of that story to the world, and then people picked it up. Tyler Perry started on his own too, so I really see that potential in your story. What path do you see the story taking after this interview?
Well, we're working on the play. But as far as children's animation, we still haven't broken ground into that where you have a Tyler Perry who or someone like that who's doing animation. We still don't have that. So
Mm-hmm.
that's the challenge. As far as the book, a lot of parents are busy now. A lot of people don't buy books like they used to. I mean, I was big on reading bedtime stories to you guys, but now mostly people want to stream things, and I guess that's the big dream for it, to be in a platform where people can stream it, computer animated, because that's what kids really gravitate towards now.
So, The Prince and Timberance is, I like to call it an epic fairy tale. It starts in a beautiful African kingdom. A prince unfortunately crosses paths with a sorcerer's vengeful and ambitious daughter. And through magic and wonder, he ends up being sent to a foreign land where he meets Timbrance, a maiden, and this represents the maiden in the story, who ends up saving his life, breaking a magic spell, and just really bringing kids in. So we've got the fairy tale genre. We've explained how you got that inspiration for a fairy tale. Why Africa?
Because I wanted it to follow the same formula as the classic fairy tales and to have an African kingdom. I think that's really important. I didn't want to create a black fairy tale and then it feel less than in any way. And there were black kingdoms. And I know growing up in America, sometimes we forget that. We think our whole culture is based around slavery and civil rights, but that's not the beginning of our culture. And I just wanted you to know that as a child, that there were and there are beautiful black kingdoms, and that's one of the hallmarks of fairy tales. So I didn't want to leave that out.
So is The Prince and Timbrance an original story?
It is. Again, I didn't want to like dip Cinderella in chocolate or give Rapunzel dreadlocks or it had to be original. And when I was thinking about writing the story for you, I wanted it to be beautiful, enchanting. I didn't want you to feel like, oh, it's just less than. Because so many times we just feel like me, I grew up and The Wizard of Oz, that was big. I really loved it. And then when I saw The Wiz, I mean, I liked it, but I felt like, wow, why couldn't we have gone somewhere enchanting as I got older? Why did it has to have to be so grounded in reality? And it's like I wanted it to have that same magical feel.
What is the intended audience's reaction to this story?
I think from a child's perspective, life is really hard right now. I want them to feel like they had a moment where they escaped. I mean, that's the purpose of fairy tales, to escape, and then that good will conquer evil. And then no matter how much somebody suffers, at some point, at the end of the day, they can be happy.
What would you say is people's reaction to the idea of Africa? When they hear the word Africa, what do people tend to visualize?
And that was another thing. Starvation, famine, war, villages, little villages. So I wanted to expand that because that's just not accurate, you know. So to me, it was just important to have a kingdom in that respect, and also it was important for me to bring it to America and have a maiden who was not over the top. I mean, A lot of times when we have something, it has to be comedic or over the top. Timberance, the maiden in the story, is intelligent, smart, sensitive, a lot of characteristics that aren't often attributed to African American women.
And then there's a prince. And when you introduced the prince to me, you made sure I knew that he was noble. Like,
Right.
so maybe you could explain.
And that as
Yeah.
well, not fit into a stereotype. So many characteristics are not related to us, noble, kind, brave.
Yeah, and then there's like a whole cast in this book that makes the story exciting. Could you speak on some of your favorite characters?
It would have to be the Prince and Timberance.
Yeah.
Yeah, but I do like Ina. I mean, Ina's the villain in the story, and you have to have that, a little
Yeah.
spice it up.
Yeah, she ends up being very fun.
Yeah.
Um, and could you explain a little bit about Timbrance and her story? Where does she come from and what does she struggle with?
Loneliness. She's bullied, and the story takes place in the late 1800s. That was important as well because I wanted it to be after slavery, but still once upon a time long ago, to again follow that formula. I didn't want this book to feel disappointing in any way. And there's a certain formula for fairy tales. So it's the late 1800s, just after slavery. I mean, there's so much that we have about slavery and the struggle that I just wanted this book to feel like a release from all of that, a break from that.
Right.
And the fairies, that's another thing that I like, the idea of black fairies.
So there's fairies in this book. Timbrance is from America, but not a slave and just kind of living a humble lifestyle. You said that she's bullied. Can you speak a little bit about that and how people could relate to her character?
Yeah, so she's, I guess the one of the other characters in the story is jealous of her, and a lot of times a bully will pick someone that maybe they do envy something about that person, and then they may see a weakness in that person or quietness. It was important for me that in the end she comes out, and she does live for the most part happily ever after. I couldn't stick with just happily ever after. That was one of the things I tweaked a little bit. Because I mean, fairy tales are good, but I mean, in this day and age, a lot of you just don't, it did have to be, I did tweak that part, I should say.
Yeah. Do you think that there are any stigmas you may have to fight by saying this is a fairy tale?
I think now you always have people who will say, well, fairy tales are out of touch. Women shouldn't look for someone to come and rescue them and save them. And actually, in my story, it's the prince who needs to be saved. So I did want to tweak that a little bit. But I know fairy tales helped me a lot growing up. When I was a little kid, even at recess, I remember we would go outside and it'd be so cold and, no mittens, no hat. So I would think, wow, I would just stand there shivering and cold and think, if I
Oh.
had a fairy godmother, I would ask her for a warm coat with a little heater inside. And that really helped me. So I think people will knock them. And I did try to take out what I don't like about fairy tales while maintaining the formula and the enchantment, the good versus evil.
That's amazing. When you read this to me when I was a kid, it was not a published book. There were no illustrations, and I was captivated. You said I sat there like the whole time
Yeah.
and didn't move. So when you imagine this book, in its ultimate expression in the world, what do you imagine it to be?
Now I would want it to be maybe a computer animated movie because I think a lot of kids now they stream things. They don't read books as much as maybe, when you were younger. Now they have that outlet. So
What do you think audiences will enjoy seeing for the first time on film with people of African descent?
I think they'll enjoy, if it was a computer animated movie, I think just seeing black fairies, seeing a black kingdom, that would be really stand out. I mean, we have Black Panther now. Um, in the 90s, I think it was, we had Eddie Murphy's Coming to America. So it's always nice to have that, to have more of that would be nice.
Yeah. So I'm gonna dive a little bit into the book now. So we've got the hardcover up here. These books are on sale on Amazon, and it's not just a story that you just open and close with text. There's actually a couple of important things. Like we have a map. Can you tell us like what this is a map of and why you included it?
It just shows the area of Nubia, because I think I know there's a rich culture there. I mean, Africa, so many different countries have rich cultures, but I think um, a lot of times we hear about the West, not very much about Nubia. Um, when my grandson saw it, he was surprised. He was like, they have diamonds in Africa? And I think I wanted to show kids that Africa is not just, you know, uh, too many times it's just about famine or war or struggles. So um, I think the visuals are really important.
Definitely. So the book is divided into chapters, so you can read a little at a time. There's a glossary included in the back of the book. And you were a reader when you were coming up, and you used to use like glossaries. And could you explain why that's in the book?
Yeah, so as kids are reading, I just thought it's nice that if they don't know the meaning of a word, that they have that tool to be able to
Great.
look it up right there.
So the prince in this story, when you hear the term like a prince, a lot of things come to mind: spoiled princes or stuffy princes. But this prince is intriguing because he's actually in on the action. He's like walking around his kingdom, hunting, serving people, helping people, noble, in all respects. And I remember when we used to visualize what the film could look like one day, we hoped that he, looked like Mekhi Phifer. I remember we had thrown that out one time. But what do you think makes the prince unique or a good addition to this story?
He does have a storyline. He just doesn't come in and save the princess. Again, he's the one in trouble. He's the one that's cursed, and she has to save him. So he has his own storyline.
That's good. So this book, it's not for just boys or just girls, it's for all children.
Right.
Okay. And would you say that this is the start of like a career you're hoping to have with other books or written works?
Yeah, definitely. I've been thinking about a prequel and also a sequel. Yeah,
Okay.
but first things first.
Okay. I just want to thank you for sitting down and explaining kind of the heart of this story as we push it in the public. We do want it to be a play, and we want to draw on just fabulous talent to get it off the ground. Um, and as we close, do you want to say like what you think having this in a children's library could do for a child?
Just add representation in a way. And one thing I like about um, younger generations now, they don't focus so much on race. So this would just be a way for African American children to feel a part of the realm of make believe. And I think as adults, a lot of times we underestimate the importance of the realm of make believe because when you're raising kids, you're so busy. And I think that's why there's that saying, it does take a village, because as a parent, you're so busy and you know what they're going to face and you want to instill so many different things in them and you know the difficulties they're going to face. But I think parents sometimes forget the importance of the imagination from a kid's perspective, enchantment and things like that. And when they're young, they're almost at an age where they can almost believe it's real. Like me, I in the back of my mind, I'm sure I knew there was no such thing as a fairy godmother. But when I was outside at recess, really cold, probably with the jacket, definitely no mittens, no hat, no boots. Just the thought of a fairy godmother just helped me make it through that difficult, period. So I think it's just important for African American children to feel a part of the realm of make believe because If they only hear about slavery and the struggle, I mean, we all need a break as adults, but we forget kids need a break too. And for them to all like, I remember your son. We don't talk about race, especially with younger kids, because we want them to feel people are people. But he asked you. He said something about, Mom, is the Mandalorian black, or the main character, is he black? So when you told me that, I knew somebody at school had told him, or had brought it up. Like maybe his friend of another race was just making a point in a kid's way that everything good is white, or the best characters are white. So I just think, like as adults, we have a lot of outlets. Tyler Perry is making movies. We have Issa Rae, so many people, but our kids have very little. So I think we need to start thinking in those terms as well.
Could you explain what makes the fairies so fun in the story?
Gosh, when I was a kid, and Disney would come on just on Sunday, and I would see the Tinkerbell just flit across the screen, and that was just like magical to me. So when Disney made their Black fairy tale, The Princess and the Frog, it's a beautiful movie, but I just was disappointed that there were no black fairies with afro puffs, maybe clean shaven heads, with just beautiful fairies in it. It's like they stopped short on that. There was no kingdom. That was disappointing to me, you know? Because what does that mean when our kids watch a black fairy tale and there's no kingdom? Does that, on a subconscious level, tell them that there were no black kingdoms, and is slavery just the beginning? I mean, subconsciously we're setting them up to believe that our history begins with slavery, and that's just a small part of it. And when you're a child, enchantment and magic is really important. I think adults, we forget that, but from a child's perspective, if we would just think about it, it's really important. And to nurture that in African American children, who knows what, there's a saying that logic will get you from point A to point B. The imagination can take you anywhere. So if we nurture their imagination, who knows what gems could form in their mind? They could think out of the box. I mean, the problems that we face as a human race is going to take some out of the box thinking. So I really think we need to nurture their imagination, and I think a lot of times we overlook the significance of that.
Yeah, and I think that the fairy tale genre is perfect to do that. Disney, brought it back for many generations. We all kind of know the Disney songs, A Dream is a Wish That Your Heart Makes. So I think this book can stand toe to toe with any of the great Disney films for kids that harvest imagination. And I think that it's going to be a hallmark of a work, a cultural work. When I talk about this book, it always has such a bigger vision. I think that it could help with a renaissance for children's films. Is that something that you feel too, that you want to speak on, or?
Yeah, I would definitely like to see it as a computer animated movie, because then I think it would reach more kids, because they like I was saying earlier, they're more into streaming more so than picking up a physical book. But I just think the imagination, childhood imagination, it just lasts for a really, really short time, but it's so important. And I think the imagination of African American children should be nurtured and represented.
Trying to do this on your
Yeah.
own, trying to publish it, self-publishing. How come you haven't given up?
Wow. It seems like along the way, there's always something. I mean, just when I want to give up, because um, my husband had said, you know, it's a really great story. And he's honest. He would have told me if it wasn't, because he was just honest. He wouldn't let me waste my time. But along the way, it's just like, just when I want to give up, something will happen. Like one little girl sent me an email. She said, I love this story so much. I read it 5 times already. That's when you had given the book to it was a little theater troupe, a little local theater troupe, and it was just something she had never seen before, an African American fairy tale. And then she sent me that email, and then it's just so many little things like that along the way that just keep me going because it would just be so much easier to just let it go. Because I would think to myself sometimes, why couldn't Oprah have written this book? Then it would have had an immediate platform. She knows Steven Spielberg. He could have turned it into a movie, and I could have just bought it. It would have been so much easier. So,
Yeah, that's what really helps me like keep this story alive and talking about it because I feel like it's an inspired work. It's not just your hustle. It's not you trying to make a name for yourself. I think the book is larger than you and larger than us.
yeah,
I think we're blessed too that through social media, the conversation around representation has been laid before us. I remember when we were first peddling this book, we used to have to introduce that conversation of like, hey, have you ever noticed there's no black kingdoms and no black fairy tales? Now, I think on social media, people are continuously asking for that.
yeah.
Yeah.
And with Black Panther, I think, and our children now, we call ourselves African American. So just think of that from a child's perspective. If you say African and American, and then when you hear of Africa, it's always starvation and problems. That's why I think Black Panther took off because it made you feel good about the African part of your African American heritage, and they could share that with their friends of other races and feel good about it. So
Yeah.
yeah,
And I think you've always known that this story is bigger than what it is. Once you
yeah,
like got the plot and the characters down, you weren't just like, "Oh, that's it, I'm done." You knew that it was bridging a gap for people's psyches, people's identities, cultural
hmm,
cultural pain and trauma that we've had to overcome. And I like how, even from the beginning, you said anybody is going to be able to sit down and enjoy this. It's not just for Black people, it's a great
no,
story.
right, right, and that was really important to me too because Cinderella. I like Cinderella.
Yeah.
It's bigger than race. It's just a good story, and I
Yeah.
liked it. And I wanted the same thing for our work. And along the way, too, I've shared it with people of other races. A banker that I worked with, she got it for her daughter, and she said her daughter actually took it to camp and read a little bit of it every night. She liked it that much. So that, it's just little things along the way that just keep me going, even when I feel like, wow, because I'm a quiet person, a shy person somewhat. Why did it have to come to me sometimes? But then something just keeps me going. And then when Disney came out with the Princess, I thought, okay, I can just forget about mine. They did it. But then, like I said, I mean, I liked it, but they took a European story and they just reworked it a little bit. It wasn't original. And no kingdom, no black fairies. I was disappointed in that. It just didn't rise to the level of enchantment. Like you said, this work can stand toe to toe with, I mean, it fits in with the genre. It doesn't feel less than. So,
Yeah, this story, I think it is such a rich story with so many characters, and I see it as more than just a book. It can be a stage play that travels across the country. Merchandising can be so fun, and then different iterations. Maybe it becomes a teen novel series, kind of like Twilight, and the books are like this big, and we
yeah,
got Timberance's
I would love
story.
that. I would love to be able to really put a lot into it, but I
Yeah.
still have my day job. So,
I'm sorry, we've been talking about this for years. So,
yeah.
yeah, it's something that I think is going to really change in the culture. It's really going to change the culture. And I'm very proud of it. And we definitely want to share it. So, where can people find the book now?
The book right now is on Amazon, but you can't type in like Black Fairy Tale. You have to actually type in the name, the Prince and Timberance, to actually find it. And when I was making this story, I just wanted to put beauty in it. So I don't know if you can get a close up of the cover, but a lot of times our works have a certain look, and I wanted the child from the just the moment they picked it up to know this is something different, you know? I didn't want it to be just like a skyscraper or just a brick wall or just too many times, I wanted it to feel just from the first moment they looked at it, this is different.
Yeah. All right, well, that is your introduction to the Prince and Timbrance. We hope that you guys support, and please use our contact information to hopefully bring some of these projects to life. We want this to be a play, and we want it to ultimately be an animated film.
Yeah, if there are any animators out there who want to take on something and give it the beauty that, it could be a fun project.
Yeah. Is there anybody that you want to thank, even if it's not by name, just like what people have done that you're very thankful for?
Oh, along the way, our photographer here, Iris, she created a video, Shamira Hill, she turned it into a play for her students. Gosh, so many people. I have a list. I didn't bring the list.
We actually have a book trailer for the Prince and Timbrance that we want to show you now, and please enjoy a book trailer for the Prince and Timbrance.
Imagine a return to classic storytelling where once upon a time, a prince from a lush African kingdom is given a magical ring. An evil sorceress, desperate to control this magic, creates a love spell to capture the ring. The prince escapes her spell, but falls victim to a more dreadful fate when she unleashes her wrath. Only a maiden with a heart that can see what the eyes cannot can break the spell. The Prince and Timbrance. Purchase and review the book on Amazon and request this book at your local library and bookstore.
So the nice thing about it being a story that's lasted through generations is now we have social media, and I think that this is gonna, build a platform where people who are gonna be key players can reach out to us that they want to work with us and that they see the vision and they want to join in because we do have the stage play coming and we do want to pitch this to indie filmmakers or just anyone with like real animation talents. So I'm definitely proud that we're going to be giving a platform to this that's going to be even bigger than what it's been so far. Okay, so there you have it. The Prince and Timbrance is available for sale on Amazon, and there is a play coming, and the author is a Phoenician resident, so she's easy to reach if you need to send some encouragement her way or want to inquire about working with us in the book. And I'm happy to be talking about this book today. I've been the literary agent for this book since it was self-published in 2012. And my mother and I have hosted and done different events surrounding this book here in the Valley. And now we just want to talk about it and have it reach a larger audience.
Definitely, yeah.